Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Betty Johnson. Dr. Betty in the Now video conversations center on real questions asked real time by real people. No ads, no scripts, no salesy agenda, and no edits. Just open, candid conversation based on things they're curious about. We record our conversations spontaneously to share them with you. In this Dr. Betty in the Now episode, I respond in the moment to questions from my client Cheryl, a learning and development leader at a technology services firm. Cheryl is interested in ways to enlist team members to embrace change. We exchange ideas about intrinsic rewards and some common pitfalls. Take a listen and let us know your thoughts.
All right. Well, Betty, thank you so much. It's great to see you again. How are you today?
I'm really good. It's springtime here in Charlotte, and I took my dog for a nice walk. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you, so I'm having a good day. Thank you.
Terrific. I am really excited for this conversation and really appreciate you accepting my invitation. I'm really looking forward to learning more about the work that you do and how that has helped influence the field of innovation and change, and some words of wisdom that you may have for me as I continue to learn about the space.
Good. I'm ready to go if you are.
Excellent. I am ready to go. So let's go ahead and dive in then.
Okay.
So I had a chance to take a look at the article that you recently published on LinkedIn called Enhancing Leadership Through the Power of Connection. And you talk about the many benefits of adopting a balanced approach to leadership where employee needs are prioritized in addition to simply looking out for the business, and how this can result in a culture of mutual respect. It seems like building this strong leader-employee relationship is fundamental to the work that you do at Bridging the Difference. I'm curious, what do you find so inspiring about this area of work? And what's the biggest challenge companies are typically facing when they call for your help?
So the biggest challenges that companies seem to be facing when they reach out to me fall in probably three categories. The first is where a leader calls me because there's a lack of alignment, either between that leader and his or her peers, or that leader and the team that reports to that person. People are operating from silos. They're operating from their individual interests and often from an individual rewards mindset. And so they're stepping all over each other. There's unproductive conflict. They get caught up in a lot of time spent in drama because whose interests are going to win out over the others. So I have a proprietary process I use with that work, which is Team to Win. And like everything that I do, I leverage validated instruments and an empathetic approach to giving feedback and helping people, whether it's a team or a collection of individuals, a group that's not really functioning like a team, help them come to some specific resolutions of how they can up their game across 19 dimensions of team performance. So it's probably more than you're asking, but I'm so passionate about this work because there's a lot of leadership development out there that really focuses on developing the individual. And that's all well and good. I do that work as well. But an individual can go back to their work context where nothing has really changed. And when attempting to make changes on their own, they'll be met with resistance. So change happening at the group level gives everyone in the group the support they need to try some new things and maybe not ace it the first time out, but recognize that we're all aiming for something higher, something better. So let's try it together and let's support each other in it. So I love doing that work with teams. Another reason that I'm hired by organizations is because there's a person, a key talent, who is getting in their own way unconsciously. Their behaviors are getting in their own way. And so the executive hires me to work with that person one-on-one as an executive coach. usually, but not always, that person is a woman or a person of color, of any gender. And I think the reason for that is because those populations are still underrepresented in leadership roles. And so when you have a really talented person who's unconsciously getting in their own way, and they hold the potential for greater representation beyond what is typical in a leadership team, executives don't want to give up on that person. So I get hired for that. And then the other thing that I get hired for is what's being called now quiet quitting.
Mm.
Yeah, which is really, well, back in the 90s and early 2000s, we called that lack of engagement. uh, and so it's where people are just doing enough to get by while also looking for another job. Or maybe they're doing more than one job, right? Surreptitiously. But what happens is there's actually a form of burnout that is contributing to that quiet quitting. And so I'm often hired to help discover and address what's causing people to be burned out.
That's very interesting. And in all three of those situations, unless you can find some forward movement, it would be very difficult for any leader to really try and implement any type of thought around innovating the organization, innovating their processes, moving forward, or certainly any large scale change. Don't have everybody in the right space in order to embark on that.
Well, most of the time, the person who hires me, who's in the executive position, they really don't know what the problem is. It's, like when you're in the soup, you don't really know all the ingredients that are making up the soup, right? You just know you're in the soup. So that's why having an external professional is really useful, because someone outside can see things differently than those inside see them.
That's a good point. Yeah, they have a different vantage point.
Yeah.
Excellent. So in the course that I've been studying, we've been talking a lot about how difficult it can be to implement organizational change, both for leaders that are asking their teams to let go of old habits, as well as how difficult it is for employees who can feel immediately destabilized by the threat of imminent change. And I'm sure having conversations that you have, you're able to quickly start to uncover some of the sources of that. What's been your experience with this? And when you think about the process, what would you say some of the biggest mistakes that leaders make as they're trying to find their way through the implementation process?
There are two models that I keep in mind when in every bit of work that I'm doing. And both of these I discovered in my PhD course. So that's one of the reasons I'm so excited for you in the academic work that you're doing. The first is, and maybe you've been exposed to this already, but it's the Burkhardt-Harris model. Is that familiar to you?
Not yet, no.
Okay, well, this is a brilliant model. And I don't know how far back it goes, maybe to the 1970s, but it's still relevant. And it's useful for evaluating change readiness. So before we start trying to make change, how ready are we? So it's a really good diagnostic as a consultant or as a leader to look at, are we really ready? So here's what the model is. It's like a mathematical formula. I don't know, you might want to write this down. We'll talk about it. It's D plus V plus F are greater than R. Very simple equation. And here's what it means. The dissatisfaction with the status quo plus a shared vision, that's the V, a shared vision of what the future could be, plus first steps toward that vision must be greater than the resistance to the change. If they are not, the resistance will prevail. And that sounds really simple, I know, but I might be dissatisfied, but you might not be. I think it might be working great for you. And so this is a collective. If the change is happening, let's say at a group level, and you and I are in the same group, I'm dissatisfied with the way things are, but you're not. Okay, we've got a 50% value on that dissatisfaction, just the two of us, and we have to consider the whole group. Many times it's just the leader who's dissatisfied, or someone even higher who's dissatisfied. You have to have that dissatisfaction with the status quo already present, already resonant. Plus, you have to have a shared vision. You and me, we have to have a shared vision for what does the future look like when we get ourselves out of this mess. We have to have the same idea of what the future looks like. Well, when you think about change efforts that you've been through, oftentimes that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
We're just given the process. Here's where we are in process. We don't really see, oh, what's at the end of the rainbow? And then the first steps toward that shared vision would mean that we would not need to not only see others taking some first steps, but we would have to take some first steps ourselves. Now, those things together will outweigh resistance. But if our score on any of the three of those is low, chances are resistance will prevail. That's why there's this phrase, maybe Gallup created it, that culture eats strategy for lunch every day.
Yep.
And that's what it's really about. It's the culture ready for the change. So at the group level, that's the way I think about it. Whenever I'm on an engagement, those are the kinds of questions I'm asking my client to understand what's the level of dissatisfaction now, et cetera. So that's at the group level, but then there's also the individual level, right? And how ready is the individual to upset the apple cart? And the model that I like to use for this is coined by David Rock in a 2008 publication. It's SCARF, which is like a scarf around your neck. That's the acronym. Maybe you and I have talked about this before. Have we?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah. So it's what are our underlying social drives? What are the things we want more of? And when someone attempts to take them away from us, we get really grabby and we resist.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is status. If the change is going to affect how I perceive my status in this organization, or I think other people are going to see my status differently, I'm going to dig in. My heels are going to dig in.
Mm-hmm.
C is certainty. Now, what's the end of the rainbow and the first steps toward it, right? So that's what gives me a sense of certainty that I can begin to predict what's going to happen. A is autonomy. So I need to be able to do it my way, not the way that somebody else tells me to do it, because I know the most about my job of anyone. So I need to be able to do it my way. Sometimes processes that come in get layered on how people do things will pull that autonomy away and they'll resist.
Mm-hmm.
R is relatedness, and that has to do with feeling like either I'm in or out, either I'm safe and protected as part of the group, or I'm being cast out of the cave. And then F is fairness, and fairness is a little bit different than we might normally think in this model. It's really about equitable exchange. So not exchanging the same, but if I do this for you, what do I get in return that's fair for me? That's fair for me. So if change means, for example, that I'm going to be working 14-hour days, 6 days a week for about 6 months, and what I get in return is I get to keep my job, that may not feel fair. So the structure of what I'm giving, I have to feel like my recompense is fair for that. So that's what drives individuals when we're trying to motivate an individual to get on the bus. Who was it that coined that phrase a long time ago? When we're trying to herd people let's ride in the car together. We're all going to Disney World. We're going to cross country on this thing. They want to get in the car for the ride. They need those 5 things, and they can't always get all 5. But if you can provide neural rewards on at least some of them, it helps to create that forward momentum.
That's really interesting. I'm curious what your thoughts are when we think about having the existence of dissatisfaction with the status quo. Do you think that a leader has the ability to help co-create that dissatisfaction with the people that they're trying to get to move?
Yes, and I think it's done not with sticks, but with carrots. Right. And so the phrase, carrots and sticks has to do with punishment and reward. And one of my favorite phrases is sticks don't stick. Because if you use sticks with key talent, they'll just leave. Now, key talent is so coveted that punishment just doesn't do the trick. So the rewards are help engaging that person in a conversation or engaging that group in a conversation. If we keep on this path, what's the future look like? What would we gain? What would we lose? Would you lose personally? If Betty lost what she thinks that she would lose, then Cheryl, what would you lose in turn? And so opening up that conversation of if we keep on this path, what does the future look like? So that people can discover for themselves, oh, the reward is a better future. The reward is a better future. I'll never forget, I worked for a company and I was a managing director at this consulting firm, and the president gathered all the managing directors around and told us how 2 years from now, some of you are no longer going to be in this room. That's how we started the conversation. We are undergoing some change and we are figuring out what it's going to look like, but it's not going to include everybody. And I mean, honestly, I think that was a really poor way to enlist people in creating change. Because when we're afraid, we have that response: fight, flight, freeze. Now, productivity doesn't reside in any of those three. Contribution doesn't reside in collaboration, innovation, creative thinking doesn't reside with any of those. So it's really essential to tap into the neural rewards, not the neural threats.
I love that. And it really does get down to the core of just basic reactions, human behavior, human instincts. And I've been thinking a lot about when you try to create an environment for change, how it really is important to take not just the company's needs in mind, but to be successful, really embracing the reality that we all have these reactions, these feelings, these needs. And if they aren't cared for, right, where does that really leave us? It just then becomes kind of a push people along and create more of an environment where maybe it is just a stick, do it or else, come along or else, which doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and I think they are the same thing. So business results and how people are engaging in the work with each other, it's the same thing. So I think I mentioned to you, I'm doing this research on dignity at work, and it's, how do people treat me? And then what do I do in response to that? And the evidence is really compelling that when leaders, managers, direct supervisors honor the inherent worth in their people through specific behaviors that to reinforce, yes, I see your value as a human being. I also see the value of your work. And when those behaviors are there, employees engage in these pro-social organizational behaviors, like they work longer hours, they help out a colleague with their work assignment, they will listen to a colleague who just needs an ear, who's having some troubles and just needs someone to talk to. They'll talk favorably about their company to people outside of their company. They'll decide to stay even though the times are tough, or the compensation dropped, or that more got dumped on their plate. And so that's the stuff that really feeds to those performance indicators, right? The financial performance indicators. And we have seen this in what people are still calling people don't want to work. I have people say that to me at least every other day, but people don't want to work. And what I would say is people are working. They're just not doing what you want them to do in the way that you're telling them to do it, for the compensation that you're willing to pay. And so it's in harnessing that want, yes, that keeps employees loyal, that reduce the costs associated with turnover, like training people, hiring people, myriad costs with turnover.
Yeah, interesting. I like that perspective a lot. So I have one final question for you. In your experience in the great number of companies that you've worked with, how would you describe the relationship between the culture of an organization and innovation? And do you think there's any dependencies?
Well, I think they are 100% interdependent. So a culture that isn't innovative will die. Will die. In today's world, a culture of doing things the way we've always done them is the recipe for going the way of the dinosaur. Markets are changing. Competitors are coming on the scene. We now have a global competitive environment. It's expanding even more as technologies expand. So if we are not innovating how we do what we do, who we do it with, even product innovation, if we are not continually innovating, we will die as an organization. And that holds true even at the individual level. You think about you think about me. If I don't continue to grow, if I don't continue to feed myself, right, and I won't survive. So it's really the same thing for an organization. It's another kind of organism. So let's think about so that's the dependency one way, right? Culture must have innovation. I can't think of an exception to this. I just can't think of an exception to it. Maybe somebody, will email me with it. But what is this? And then you think about how innovation is completely dependent upon culture. So in order to be innovative, the organization has to reward failure. And a lot of organizations don't do that, right? So they might say, this is a place where it's safe to fail, but they don't actually acknowledge with all of the hurdles you were facing, you failed. And here was the value of your failure to the organization. And that's going to show up in your paycheck. So the reward systems have to support failure. Otherwise, people will continue to play it safe.
And isn't that going back to the idea of a natural human tendency? Don't most of us tend to gravitate to what feels comfortable, what feels normal? It provides that stability that you were talking about. Isn't that kind of our natural state, to that fight or flight? We're gonna do what's comfortable, and the forces that must be at play to get people to think about it's okay to be uncomfortable, right? We hear that all the time, but to actually practice it, especially for large organizations across the company on a day-to-day basis, has to be an incredible feat.
It has to be rewarded. I mean, this is a firm position that I take. It has to be rewarded. So yes, many people like comfort. They are not risk takers, but not everyone is like that. So for example, people who are status seekers, and I'll raise my hand for that, and people who really love autonomy, and that's my top driver of those 5 SCAR. I want to go out there and do something different. I'm not really comfortable with things staying the same or even being predictable. So different personalities need different kinds of dynamics. We don't all have the same equal value across that entire SCAR domain, all 5 domains. Some people are more motivated by relationships than at work than anything else. So if what we want is innovation, then the reward needs to be about relationships, where I'm not going to feel like I am criticized or I put somebody else out. The other things that people who are really driven by relationship rewards think. Yeah, so it's different for different people, remembering that, I think, is absolutely key. Not everyone is just comfortable. For years, as I was growing my career in industry, I mean, for 30 years, I did this, right? So moving myself up the ladder, I heard people say no one likes change. And I always objected to that because I love change. For me, my drivers, change is opportunity. Bring it on. And even if it means that I suffer, well, I'm going to use that suffering because I have a really strong autonomy drive. So it's not really true that no one likes change. Change is positive. That's where opportunity is. We just need to see that picture, all of us.
Well, and doesn't that dovetail into the topic of growth mindset, right?
Absolutely.
It's mindset that we can grow from those experiences, that those experiences are not a threat to our safety or our status, which is a whole other topic. But
yeah, but Carol Dweck really, she landed on something. Her original work was with children, right? But these preferences that we have for what really drives us, they are formed when we are children. So it's just brilliant work, that growth mindset work that we can take into how we see the workplace now. Yes, make it safe to fail, even reward it, give it praise that I know you didn't do your best here. I know you can do better. Had a great boss, Cheryl, the best man I ever worked for, president of the company. He asked me to do something for him. It was a client-facing thing, and this huge client, Canadian client, and he asked me to put together a presentation, which I did for him. And he called me up. He didn't send me an email. He just called me on the phone and said, I've been looking at what you did, and this is not your best work. What's going on? I know you're capable of so much better than this. What happened? Now, that was one of the best conversations I've ever had with a leader. It was so empathetic without being enabling, right? So he was calling me out on my on my not great work product, but he was letting me know that he knew it had to have been because something's going on. So what is it? I care about you. Let's find out what it is. And I'm going to want you to redo this. Really, really brilliant. Yeah, I would have followed him anywhere.
Yeah, a reinforcement of the potential that he knew you had, right? The opportunity in front of you, and not necessarily a recognition or a reprimand for the poor work, but I know there's more here.
It was actually a compliment. I know you can do better than this.
Yeah.
It was actually a compliment.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many great nuggets in there. I feel like we could dive into 100 different places. But I want to be respectful of your time. So I'll just simply close by asking any other golden nuggets that as I embark on this learning journey, you might share with me.
Well, Simon Sinek says, know your why. And I've been trying to know my why for a long time. But I'm getting really closer to knowing what that why is. Why do I really care about this work? What is the thing in me that's always been in me that makes me care about this work? I mean, I remember back when I was in college in my undergraduate years. This is so amazing to me that I did this. In my third year of college, I did a project with National Gypsum. I called up the head of HR and said, I want to do some research on flex time. This is before people had home computers even. And so National Gypsum allowed me to come in, a 20-year-old, and do an employee-wide survey on flex time.
Wow.
So I've obviously had this drive for a long time that I would be that self-starter. Now, by the way, I was an English major. So what was I doing in this graduate level course doing research? And, I can trace it all back to my mom, who worked full time. She was an executive secretary, which was an important job for her era, her generation. And my mom was always tired. She was always tired. I photographs where we're sitting on the sofa. She's helping me with my homework and she has dark circles under her eyes, you know. And I really think that it's just been a drive for me since those early years of how can we make it better for people like my mom so that when they get home from work, they're not too tired for their kids, their communities, that they have more to give to the people that matter to them outside of work because their work is so rewarding and absent of those things that put dark circles under your eyes. So I would say for you and anyone else in your class, the closer you can get to your real why, like what is driving you to care about this, that's where you'll find your juice. That's where you'll find your energy that you can tap into anytime. It's always there.
I love that. That's excellent. We're always in search of the purpose. Why do we care about things? I love your story. That's terrific.
What strikes you in this Dr. Betty in the Now conversation? Email your comments, questions, or alternate views to me directly at betty@bridgingthedifference.com. If you want to know when future Dr. Betty in the Now videos are released, follow me on LinkedIn at Bridging the Difference. Or subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter, Get It Done Together. Thanks for listening.